Happy holidays, everybody, and Tony here with my review of the John Rutter Christmas album, which was recorded in April 1985, January 1987, January 1989, April 1993, and June 2002 at the Great Hall of University College School in London, as well as the Henry Wood Hall, also in London, and which was compiled in 2002 as well as released by Collegium Records. The conductor, composer, and arranger was John Rutter. It was produced and engineered by Gillian White, Campbell Hughes, and Simon Eden, and it starred the Cambridge Singers, as well as the soloists, baritones Stephen Varco and Gerald Finley, and soprano Ruth Holton, and the orchestra was the City of London Sinfonia. I was mainly approaching John Rutter with an open mind because I was introduced to this composer, conductor, and music arranger through my very good friend and flatmate, who also introduced me not only to him, but also to this particular Christmas album, which was our usual yearly tradition of listening to the John Rutter Christmas album every holiday season. Before being acquainted with John Rutter, I had no idea who this musician, composer, and conductor was. That was until I not only listened to the Christmas album, but also did a bit of research on this gentleman that I discovered that he did contribute to the world of music ever since he was 18. And his musical style was a combination of classical music and chamber music, as well as a bit of folk music. He is not only renowned in his native United Kingdom, specifically in England, but also all around the world, specifically in the United States of America. And as I listened to his compositions, as well as the way he conducted the orchestra, I managed to formulate a couple of adjectives that perfectly describe John Rutter. Balanced, harmonious, very pleasing to the ear, and absolutely crisp all the way through. There was not one note that I thought was too forte, let alone too pianissimo. It was all well balanced. It was all nuanced all the way through. And the fact that he was able to combine the influences found in classical music, chamber music, and folk music make him an absolutely peerless musician, with not only a keen ear and equally keen mind, but also abundant charisma, loads of personality, and great discipline. He was also courageous enough to add in some variations to some familiar pieces while also composing his own music, thus demonstrating his precision in the text as well as in the score, and organizing his music as clearly, cleanly, and peerlessly as possible. That pristine sense of clarity and cleanliness is also demonstrated in how he conducted the Cambridge Singers as well as the City of London Sinfonia. Both the City of London Sinfonia and the Cambridge Singers demonstrated nuances, using vocal and musical colors and shadings to give a lot of multidimensionality to their performances, and followed directions as to where some places needed to be a little bit slower and where some places needed to be a little bit more vibrant, especially evidenced in their renditions of Deck the Halls and We Wish You a Merry Christmas. Therefore, John Rutter commanded both the City of London Sinfonia and the Cambridge Singers with clarity, precision, and great direction, thus producing all the lovely tones, colors, shadings, and nuances that are necessary to bring out the best out of these Christmas songs. Speaking of the choice of Christmas songs, there were also some very eclectic choices from rarely heard pieces such as There Is a Flower, Wildwood Carol, and Jesus Child, as well as Dormi Jesu, which is a medieval Christmas carol, but with words by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who I also learned about during my nature writing course, specifically in my 4th semester as a bachelor's in English student. Dormi Jesu to me was the most striking because I also learned about not only this particular medieval Christmas carol, but also about the writer Samuel Taylor Coleridge, as he was also one of the writers involved in nature writing throughout the late 1700s and early 1800s. And writers like Coleridge didn't just deal with nature, let alone perceive nature as something that is beautiful, but also something that transcends mortality. Therefore, with Dormi Jesu, the C minor key also gives off that sense of transcendentalism, transcending the flesh and embracing the spirit. And it's not just the C minor arrangement that did that, but also that long flowing tempo that managed to complement that C minor key so well, which emits that feeling of transcending the flesh and entering the spirit. Aside from those rarer classics, especially those composed and arranged by John Rutter, there were also the popular holiday classics like Joy to the World, Deck the Halls, The Holly She Bears a Berry, The Wexford Carol, We Wish You a Merry Christmas, and, of course, Silent Night. And John Rutter's arrangement of Joy to the World is extremely fascinating because he not only arranged it in the D major key, but also created some variations to go along with it. There was an occasion in which a minor key was involved, as well as a much higher key, and even going back to its original D major key, thus adding in variations to an already familiar Christmas carol. We Wish You a Merry Christmas was also just as interesting because of how it managed to take advantage of the speed and tempo changes, and both Deck the Halls and We Wish You a Merry Christmas also made good use of some brass instruments. But I would also argue that the strongest aspect about John Rutter's compositions and arrangements is how he was able to use the human voices extremely well, even without the accompaniment of instruments. And when there was orchestration, sometimes it was rather minimal, or basically just using a couple of instruments at most, to emit that feeling of personal intimacy. And both the City of London Sinfonia and the Cambridge Singers managed to accomplish that so beautifully. As for the soloists, some of them actually quite surprised me, and Gerald Finley was one who surprised me the most. I mainly associated Gerald Finley in a lot of dramatic baritone roles, considering that I first heard him when I was 15 years old as Golo from Claude Debussy's Pelléas et Mélisande, and ever since then, he has been singing roles like Hansachs and Scarpia, although he did have his beginnings as a lyric baritone singing Mazzetto from Don Giovanni and Papageno from Die Zauberflöte, and his lyric baritone origins were still intact when he was singing I Wonder as I Wander. And that caressing, gentle tone that he was able to produce not only surprised me in the most positive way possible, but it also made me realize just how masterfully he was able to accomplish soft lyrical singing, especially in Mr. Finley's gloriously youthful prime. Yes, these days he seems to specialize in the rougher characters, but Gerald Finley's lyrical beginnings can never be taken for granted, especially when it came to his solo numbers, as he was able to add in a fair amount of sensitivity and charm to the carols that he sang. Equally as sensitive and charming was the other baritone, Stephen Varco, who also gave such a fine rendition of the Wexford Carol. His elegant lyric baritone voice was also put to fine use with this Christmas carol, and there were no signs of vocal faultiness, thus producing a singing voice that can sing beautifully, softly, and elegantly, with good precision and good musicality. Ruth Holton's lovely lyric soprano voice was also a nice asset, especially in her solo, There Is a Flower. She managed to make her voice bloom and blossom with that sweet girlishness, as well as that youthful innocence that made her shine so well. There is no doubt that the John Rutter Christmas album was such an amazing experience from beginning to end. Not only did I enjoy the usually popular holiday songs from Deck the Halls to Silent Night, but I also got myself acquainted with even rarer pieces, especially Dormi Jesu, which was my absolute favorite, as well as There Is a Flower and the Donkey Carol, as well as many other compositions done by John Rutter himself. Maestro Rutter's mastery of combining classical music with chamber music, as well as a bit of folk music, was in pure evidence in this Christmas album, and he was able to emit that grand mastery extremely well, which is also reflected in how the City of London Sinfonia, the Cambridge Singers, as well as the soloists, Gerald Finley, Stephen Varco, and Ruth Holton performed. And you know darn well what I'm going to give the John Rutter Christmas album. I'm going to give it a well-deserved rating of 5 out of 5 stars. It is a must listen, especially if you are a huge fan of British Christmas carols, or if you are a huge fan of John Rutter and the many musical influences that he managed to imbue in this album, let alone the entire body of his works. Even if you've never heard of John Rutter, let alone his body of works before, I can safely recommend this Christmas album because John Rutter's mastery as a musician, as well as a composer and a conductor, are all wonderfully reflected here. And it's also reflected in how the orchestra, the singers, and the chorus performed. They performed to the best of their abilities, and they were able to give off such nuanced performances preserved on record. And for those of you who listened to the John Rutter Christmas album, what'd you think of it? Was there a particular Christmas carol that you loved? Did you love it in its entirety? Was there a soloist who stood out to you so much, whether it be Gerald Finley or Stephen Varco or Ruth Holton? Or did you feel like this album was not really to your liking? Please comment below and let me know. Well, that's it for my review of the John Rutter Christmas album. Tune in next time for my review of Michael Bublé's Christmas album, which was released back in 2011. So until then, happy holidays, everybody!